about time we had a little refresher on how to title a game. As the year draws to a close and I go over the usual shower of bastards that were this year's releases, the sheer soporific blandness of a title like Lords of the Fallen really stands out. What is it with all the rising and falling these days? If it's not Dead Rising, or Dark Knight Rising, or Immortals Phoenix Rising, it's a Red Fall, or a Titan Fall, or a Babylon's Fall, or a Jedi Fallen Order. Must everything be constantly moving upwards and downwards like a snail traversing a trilby? Names are important. No one would have voted for Abraham Lincoln if his name had been Coochie Mama J. Sloppy Wank. And I have fairly simple criteria for what I consider a good game title. I like a name to be short and memorable, so that people can easily recall it to mind when trying to Google it or recommend it to a friend. One rule of thumb is to think of how it'd shake out if your game title was the name of your dog. How comfortable would you feel yelling it across a park, or explaining it to a microchip registry service? Here, Starfield, Catch the Ball, Dredge, those work. On the other hand, come Immortals Phoenix Rising, roll over Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning. Bit of a car crash of the tonsils, isn't it? Not that I'm insisting every title be one word long, because then we'd miss out on the beauty of names like Symphony of the Night, or A Mind Forever Voyaging. As long as it's unique, flows nicely off the tongue, and importantly represents what the game's actually bloody about on at least some level, then I'd say you're good to go. There's quite a lot of nuance to this, so allow me to compile a small list of general do's and don'ts when it comes to game titling. Actually, let's save time and stick with the don'ts. Don't give your game exactly the same name as a pre-existing game. To start with the obvious one, although it's apparently only obvious to people who aren't game publishers, who take the view that there's no such thing as bad established IP. In theory, you can't lose. Copy the name of an established good thing, like with Syndicate 2012 or Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, then people will buy it because they associate it with the good thing. But copy the name of something that was mediocre or forgettable the first time around, as with Prey 2017 or Lords of the Fallen, you create a sense of breathing new life into a dead idea that had potential. In practice, though, it only ended up making Prey 2017 even more forgettable, and it's always annoying to us gaming media types who, when referencing the game, have to keep bolting the year it came out on to the end like a stupid donkey hitched to a fancy sports car. Don't give your game a subtitle if it isn't a sequel. I had a running joke back in Zero Punctuation where I'd dry heave every time a game's name contained an unnecessary colon. Apparently sometimes one name doesn't suffice. Only two names jammed awkwardly together will suit our special interesting baby. I first started doing this in my review of Lichdom Battle Mage, and it's probably the only reason I even remember that fucking game. Battle Mage by itself would have been a beautiful title. What happens if they bring out the long-awaited sequel now? Would it be Lichdom 2 or Battle Mage 2? Because I know which one my eyes would immediately roll off into the nearest sick bucket. See, the dual title implies the intention to create a larger franchise, and while sometimes that ends up being the case, like when Amnesia the Dark Descent and A Plague Tale Innocence got sequels, at other times it smacks of tempting fate. Hanging a fancy double-barreled title off a one-game failure like a jumbo sausage sellotaped to a blobfish is a great way to end up looking very silly. Don't give your sequel a subtitle that sucks. Since we just brought it up, consider for a moment the title of Amnesia's first sequel, Amnesia: A Machine for Pigs. Whatever you think of that game, you can't deny the name catches the eye. Instantly our mind fizzes with questions. Pigs? You mean the pink squirmy animals that give me bacon? What manner of machine could be for them? Something related to slicing bacon, I assume, but why would you make a video game about that? Well, now we have to play it to find out. Compare that to what goes through the mind when we hear the title of the third mainline Amnesia game, Amnesia Rebirth. Oh, a random word that begins with re. Be still my heart. The Matrix has a lot to answer for, besides that terrible brief window in the early 2000s when black trench coats were trendy. Its two sequels, Matrix Reloaded and Matrix Revolutions, established a naming convention that blights sequels to this day. Reloaded, Revelations, Retribution, Requiem, Reckoning, Regurgitated, and let's not forget the honorary re-words, Origins, Armageddon, Chronicles, and every other hackneyed sequel add-on. My objection to all of these is that most of them don't really convey any meaning beyond it is a sequel. The Matrix Reloaded basically translates to The Matrix Another One, and if that's all you want to convey, then there was nothing wrong with the classic numbering system. At least then we know what order to put them in. Don't name your game by the following method. Pick one word or any synonym of it from both of the following lists. List A: Age, Gods, Lords, Shadow, Rise, Fall, Curse, Chronicle, Guardians. List B: Darkness, Light, War, Chaos, fallen, infinity, ancients. Now take your two words and glue them together in your preferred order, connected with an of or an of the. Or yes, perhaps just a colon if you're really committed. Congratulations, you've come up with another fucking generic meaningless name for my eyes to skip straight over without slowing when I'm browsing Steam. I know your mum assured you that Shadows of Darkness was very creative when you were 13 years old and writing your first epic fantasy novel, but now you're just one twat in the internet's never-ending river of twats. Don't make your game title a bollock sandwich. So, some people eventually twigged that the above two-list method produced nothing but hackneyed garbage, but weren't creative enough to not use it, and so they thought, aha, here's an idea, why don't we spice it up with some weird, exotic, additional made-up word that evokes a faraway land of fantasy, or possibly a piece of IKEA furniture. And this method brought us titles like Immortals of Avium, Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, Immortals Phoenix Rising, Walson Lords of Mayhem. I call this titling method the bollock sandwich, because it consists of a few generic white bread title words with a little bit of total bollocks in the middle, and the effect that I've observed is that counterintuitively, such titles become even harder to recall to memory than the non-bollocksed variety. Something about the combination of having to now remember a nonsense word as well as the generic part makes my brain somehow even less inclined to permanently latch on. I can only now remember Walson Lords of Mayhem because I have on 3 separate occasions had to dig through my own archives going, what the fuck was the name of that Diablo knockoff I reviewed a while back? The one with the bald dude on the front with the beard and the pauldrons big enough to shelter a horse. Don't give your franchise a name with the initials AC. This one isn't quite as automatically offensive as some of the previous examples. I only wanted to bring it up because it's weird how many of them there are. Assassin's Creed, Animal Crossing, Armored Core, Assetto Corsa, Asheron's Call, Ace Combat, Astral Chain. What is it about these specific initials that video games find so automatically captivating? Is it their appealing cadence? The aesthetic component? Actual communists? Let me ardently counsel being appropriately cautious of employing such an aggravating combination. All right, cockheads.